Hi, my name is Ivan, and I'm a member of the Client Services team here at Kcura. I'll be spending the next 45 minutes or so running you through the basic functionality of objects and applications in Relativity. We know it's tough to get away from your regular work for an hour, so we do appreciate your time. We hope to make it worth your while. The objective of this training is to gain an understanding of how relativity objects operate and the workflow required for building a relativity application. In today's webinar, we'll be covering working with existing objects in Relativity workspaces, creating a few dynamic objects, and creating an application using those objects that we've created. Before we dive in, let's define a few key terms you'll be hearing throughout this webinar. First, what is an object? Depending on what you're doing in Relativity, you could think of objects in two ways. First, objects are workspace items that store information. For example, you can see that this contact object holds name, title, and company of various contacts. When creating applications, you can also think of objects as tables of a database that are secureable and customizable within your workspace. They store fields, use views to visualize data, and they use layouts to enter data. Each Relativity workspace already contains system objects such as document and OCR objects. We'll be creating a few dynamic objects from scratch in the webinar. Anytime you create a new custom object, it's important to decide what your goal is and plan and map out every piece of the object in order to accomplish that goal. When you create a new object, the following items are automatically created. We'll have a tab, several fields including a name field, several system fields, a default view, and a default layout. From here, everything is customizable. Now, does everyone know what views and layouts are? You could raise your hand if you need further explanation. Okay, well, a view is a customizable list of items in Relativity from which a user can sort and filter to locate specific items. A layout is a web-based coding form that gives reviewers access to view and edit document fields and complete specific tasks in a review. Now, what is an application? An application in Relativity is a combination of objects and fields that, when used alone or in conjunction with other, store and manage information beyond the document metadata. Relativity uses applications to run many of its features, such as search and reports, OCR, and native imaging. Once created, you'll be able to export or import applications, as well as store the application within the application library. There are many different types of applications that can be created in Relativity. For example, if you're conducting a structured evidence review where information is specific to this matter and may not be needed for others, you could design an application that would store log files, exports of database structures, and Excel spreadsheets. Additionally, you could build applications in a workspace dedicated to business workflow management to manage day-to-day tasks for your organizations. You could build an application that tracks employees' Relativity skill levels. You could include items to track what experience a user has in Relativity. For example, who knows how to do security permissions, who knows how to build layouts, who has certifications, etc. Everything you need to build an efficient team can be stored here in one place. So case organization is another common business workflow situation where Relativity applications can be useful. We will begin by looking at a finished object. First, I'll take a moment and I'm going to switch to Relativity. So I'm going to go into the Salt versus Pepper workspace and just open the first document that comes up in my view. The custodian field is shown here in the coding layout. What if we want to associate more information about a custodian, such as their department, employment dates, direct manager, direct reports, their roles in the litigation? If we were to store this information on a document object, we would need to repeat it for every record that a custodian is linked to. That would be 5 additional fields of coding for each record, and the chances of data entry errors goes up as you code more and more documents. However, if we store this information on a separate object or table and link that one custodian record to all of their documents, the amount of coding is significantly decreased. Also, this custodian information is likely to be about the custodian and not about the document itself. So by creating a custodian object, you could give the reviewers a place to specify custodian information and simply link that information to the documents that the custodian owns. So let's click on Andrew's name here in the layout. We'll see what we get. The custodian object has custodian details at the top and lists associated documents to this custodian. Also notice that the company name has a blue hyperlink as it's associated to a company object. The custodian object performs like the document object, storing data about the custodian and linking to certain documents on the document object. So this is just one example of a dynamic object in Relativity. Next, let's look how to better utilize existing objects in a workspace. I'm going to go back home and go into another workspace. In this workspace, I'll go to my Author Domain tab. Here, the Author Domain tab, we have a list of all the email domains that an email was sent from. This list was populated by running domain parsing transform set. Transform sets give us the ability to focus on emails from a specific domain to analyze communications. To be able to see a list of email domains that's helpful, but right now if I was to click on one of the domains in our list, I'm just going to be presented just with the domain name. Not very helpful. As you can see, there really isn't any information tied to this domain other than the name. You could take this a step further and modify the author domain layout to include an associative object list pointing to the document object, so you can easily see which documents are related to each domain. The associative object list allows you to display the emails linked to a specific domain. So let's take a step back. What do I mean by associative object? Essentially, you could think of this as a link between two objects. We'll be creating a few objects, specifically multiple objects. Now, why are they called multiple objects? Multiple objects have a many-to-many relationship. For example, more than one item from one object can connect to more than item from another object. So a single domain can be associated to many documents, while conversely, a single document may contain multiple domains. A primary aspect of any application is the linking of these objects together. We'll need to add an object list to the layout to accomplish this. So I'm going to go to Administration and then pick the Layouts, and I'll go to this Author Domain Layout. I'll just select this. Now to add the associative object list to our layout, I'll need to click the Build Layout button. This will bring up our layout. In the top right, we can click this little arrow to bring the Add Object list to focus. And then I will be able to select the object I'd like to add. I'm going to add the document author domains. That's all we really need to do here. I'll save and close. Now we've added an associative object to the author domain layout. Let's go back to the Author Domain tab and see these results. Later I'll go over how to create proper fields to be used as associative objects. When you start to plan out your application, consider which fields you want to have as linking fields. Well, now that I'm in my author domain tab, I'll just grab another domain. Now we can easily identify the documents associated with this email domain. Let's say you want to find all documents from this Enron domain that were sent within a particular date range. You could filter on the documents returned by using a between operator. First, I'll click on the filter icon. This brings up my filters. And I'm going to the email sent date, and I click in here, and I'm simply going to type in my filter, which is going to be February 1st, 2001 between October 31st, 2001. Click on that and press enter. And now we can see all the items that were sent on this particular date range. Now that I've covered how to use existing objects in Relativity and further expand their functionality, we have the fundamentals for building our own application in Relativity. Let's say I'd like to store all of our information about a case, such as pleadings, context, and review documents in one location. This would be beneficial to the team as it will assist in collaboration, expedite the review, and provide a secure environment for this material. The first thing we need to do to get started in our pleading application is build our dynamic objects to hold all of our pleadings and related contacts. There are countless types of dynamic objects that could be built. Dynamic objects can hold data that relates directly back to our document object, like the custodian object that we looked at initially. The custodian object holds data specific to each custodian in our workspace while also displaying the documents each custodian is associated with. We can also build objects that do not tie back to the document object. Before we jump into creating our pleadings application, let's look at a simple pleading application map. Mapping out your application beforehand is a great way to build a blueprint for how to build the application. You can see here that we have two dynamic objects in our application. We have the pleading object and the contact object. Each object will have its own set of fields as listed here in our map. And then lastly, we'll use the multiple object fields on our contact object to link the names of the objects. You'll see more about how this works as we continue to work through. This planning phase is the real work in building our application. The rest is just knocking it out. So let's hop into Relativity and we'll get started. I'm going to start by creating a new object. This object will hold our pleadings. In administration, I'm going to choose object type, and I'll be making a new object type. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it pleadings. I'm going to keep the default settings for the rest of the settings, that everything else here is fine, and I'll click Save and Back. So let's see if our object was created. And we can see our object right here. Now if we created the pleading object, several items will be created in Relativity whenever you create any new object. Let's take a look at everything that got created. The first thing we'll notice is that we now have a new tab called Pleading. If we click into this tab, we'll see that the pleadings does have a all pleading view. In addition to the tab in the view, we'll see that a layout gets created. I'll go to my Layouts tab, make sure all layouts are selected, and I'll search for pleading, and we have our pleading layout here. Now let's take a look at the fields that got created when we created the pleading object. I'll switch over to fields. Again, I'm in all fields. I'm going to filter, and I'm going to look for the object type, pleading. Filter for that object. Now we're looking at all the fields that were created when we created our pleading object. The same 6 fields are always going to be created automatically. We can update the name field to be a little bit more descriptive. Let's edit that name field. And I'm going to change this from name to pleading title, because this is going to be essentially the title of our pleading. And I'll click Save and Back. So now we have a place to store pleading, but we need to create some supporting fields for our pleading. I'm going to go ahead and create the following fields. I'll make date of pleading, docket number, pleading type, and pleading link. The pleading link field will provide the ability to upload pleadings directly to our object. So I'm going to click on New Field, and first things first, I will select pleading for my object type. These fields will be created for this object. So the first one I'm going to make here is going to be the date of the pleading. I'm going to make this of type date. Next I'm going to click Save and New. Clicking Save and New will keep me on this pleading object for ease of use. So now I can make a pleading type. The pleading type will be a single choice field. Click Save and New. I'll need a docket number associated with the pleading. I'm just going to make this a fixed length text field. I'll click Save and New once more, and then I'll make the pleading link. This is going to be of the type file. File allows us to upload our pleadings into the object. And finally, I'll click Save. When you create a new field, always keep in mind that if a field is set to include in index yes, it's going to be automatically indexed in the keyword index when using that field in a template workspace. I'm going to move on and create the choices for the pleading type field. So I'll have to go to my Choices tab. Let our new Choice Builder application load up here. Takes a moment, but it's worth it. One of the things I really like about this Choice Builder application is it allows you to add many choices at once. So the object type we're going to be adding these choices into is going to be pleadings. In the field name, I'm going to click pleading type. That's our choices there. And I'm going to click on Add Many Choices. In the text box, I can now just put my choices in separated by hard return. So I'll put in answer, brief, complaint, have an order, or possibly even a subpoena. I'll click Apply and Save. We're also going to want to be able to add the attorney's names associated with the pleading. We could create a field to store this information directly on our pleading object, but it might make more sense to create an additional object to store our attorneys. This way, just like we saw previously with the custodian object, we'd have a place to store the information directly related to the attorneys, such as contact info and the company information. I'm going to create a new object to store the attorney data before creating any additional fields. So once again, I'm here in my Object Type tab. I'm going to click on New Object. I'm going to make a contact object that will be used for this. Once again, I'm going to keep all the default settings and simply click Save. The same fields get generated when we create any object, but we'll need to add some additional fields as well. Let's create the following supporting fields for this contact object. We'll need company, street address, city, state, and zip code. So I'll go to my Fields tab. I'm going to be making a new field. I'm going to select my contact object this time. And let's make some fields for the contact object. I'm going to make company, and this will be fixed length. And I'll click Save and New throughout here. I'm going to have a street address. This will be fixed length. I'll click Save and New. City, state, and the zip code. I could just make this whole number. Now click Save and New. Now because we have different types of pleadings submitted by our attorneys as well as opposing counsel, let's create two separate fields that will allow us to differentiate between the attorneys on each side. So I'll make a field called Attorneys. This is going to be our first multiple object. Because the attorneys, it's a multiple object on the contact object, I'm going to associate this with the pleading object. I'll click Save and New, and I'm going to make another field for the opposing counsel. Also on the contact object, also a multiple object, and also connected to pleading. And I'll click Save. So now we have all the fields needed to store the information regarding our pleadings and the different attorneys working with them. Now we'll need to give our users the ability to interact with these fields. Let's update our views and layouts so we can begin using our new object. First, I'll update the All Pleadings view. A nice little trick for this is I'm going to go into the Pleading tab, and the All Pleadings view is shown here. In the new version, we'll have a little pencil here that I could click to edit this view. So I need to move in the following fields into my view. I'm going to need data pleading. I'll need the docket number, pleading link, attorneys, and opposing counsel. I'm going to click Save here. And after saving, we can see all of our fields reflected in the view. Now let's update the pleading layout. I'm going to go back to my Layout tab, and I'll select my pleading layout, and I'll build this layout. So we're going to now add our supporting fields to the layout. In the Layout console, underneath Fields, I'm just going to click and drag the following fields over to the default category. I'm going to go for date of pleading, docket number, pleading type, and the pleading link. While we're here on the layout, let's go ahead and add our attorneys and opposing counsel fields from the contacts object. I'm able to do this because of the multiple object fields we created earlier. I'll do this by adding an associative object to this layout. So once again, I'm going to click on the little down arrow so I can go to Add Object List. And the object I want to add is going to be attorneys. See that pop up on the left? And then I am also going to add another object, and this will be for the opposing counsel. So now we can see attorneys and opposing counsel have been added. And I'll click Save and Close to save my layout. Now that we've updated our pleading layout and view, let's update the contact view and layout. So once again, I'll go to the Contact tab here. I'm going to edit this contact, the All Contacts view. I'm going to add in our associated fields of company, street address, city, state, zip code, and I'll click Save. So once again, to allow our reviewers to be able to input specific contact information on the layout, we'll have to add these fields to the layout. So let's go to Layouts once again. This time I'm going to filter for my contact layout. Click on that, build my layout, and just drag and drop again. So we'll have our company, have our street address, city, state, and zip code. I will also add the pleadings associated with objects. So let's add in our pleading attorneys. Let's add in our pleading opposing counsel. So we'll save and close this. We are now ready to use our new object. Let's create an attorney in the contact object. Then we'll create a sample pleading. So to do this, I'll go to my Contact tab, and I will click on New Contact. And I'm going to add myself. I'm Ivan. I'm with Kekura, 231 South LaSalle, Chicago, Illinois. Thank you, Google, for autofilling. And I'll click Save right there. Okay, we now have a contact, so let's create a pleading. To do that, I'm going to go to my Pleadings tab. Just like before, I'm going to make a new pleading. The pleading title is going to be, let's make this a breach of contract. Make it a complaint. The date of the pleading will be just today. Done there. Docket number, this is going to happen in the Illinois courts, so give it an Illinois address. And then this is going to be of a type complaint. For the pleading link, I'm going to upload a sample complaint that I have here off of my desktop. Here's my complaint. It's just a PDF of the complaint itself. Then for this, I'll now click Save as our pleading is completed. We're now looking at the pleading we just created. We can now add the contact that we created to either attorneys or opposing counsel details of the pleading. I'm going to add myself to the attorney section. I'll click Link. I'll choose Me, add myself, and click Set. The pleading now has an attorney contact associated. We can add more attorneys and we can add more opposing counsels to each one of these pleadings. We now have successfully created a dynamic object to store all the pleadings and all the pleadings related to this case, and contact object to store all of our contact information. We're also linked these two objects using the multiple object fields. So we can see the information contained on both of those objects. We certainly do not want to have to create these objects and fields in other workspaces, especially if we wanted to use the same structure. As such, we can now bundle everything we created into a Relativity application, which allows us to export and import into other workspaces easily. As I mentioned earlier, Relativity applications provide the flexibility to develop and implement custom applications for improved case and matter management. This also helps the user experience based on the needs of your environment. We typically recommend building custom applications to manage tasks and information to support large-scale review and provide a platform for the review of structured data. Let's create the pleading application. Back in Relativity, to create an application from all of these dynamic objects that we built, we'll need to navigate to the Relativity Application tab. So go to Relativity Applications, and I'm now going to make a new Relativity application. We have the Create New application checked by default, and I'm going to call my application pleadings. I'm also going to give it a version number if I decide to update some items later on. I'll click Save, and once the application is saved, we're presented with the application layout. This is where we'll decide what items are going to make up our application. As I scroll down through the layout, note that you can add the following items to an application. We could add object types, fields, choices, views, layouts. We can add tabs, event handlers, object rules, relativity scripts, custom pages, agents, event handlers, mass operations, and finally save searches. Up on the top right of the screen is the Relativity Application Console. Currently, the following options are available through the Application Console. Under Manage Application, we have the ability to upgrade the application, export or lock the application, and push it to the library. Underneath that, we have the application information. There are options to show the application breakdown or show errors. Notice that show errors is unavailable. This is because we currently have no errors in this application. You will receive an error if there are items missing from the application that are dependent on an item that already is selected in the application. Let's demonstrate this. I'm going to add a field to the application in the field section. We have three options. We have New, Link, and Unlink. New button allows us to create a new item on the fly, whether it be an object or a field or a layout or view. The link allows us to link or associate an object, an existing item, into our application. The unlink option allows us to remove that item if we needed to. In the fields section, I'm going to click on link, and I'll show my filters. And I'm going to filter for contact. And then I'm going to select the field called name on the contact object. I'll click add and then set. Now that we've added a field to our application, you can see that the show errors is now available. Notice that the export and show application breakdown options are no longer available. This is because we will not allow an application to be exported if it's not complete. The reason that there's an error is because we've chosen a field for our application but did not select the object that the field is dependent upon. Let's look at our show errors message and get some details. The errors screen will notify us what is missing from our application. In this case, it's the contact object associated with the name field. It's missing and it needs to be added before we can continue. So let's proceed with adding our items to the application, starting with the different object types, and then we'll work our way down. I'm going to close that right there, and I'll go to object type, and I'm going to choose link. Once again, I'm going to grab my filters open here, and we'll filter for some things. I'm going to need my contact object that I created. I'll add that. And I also need my pleading object. Go ahead and add that. And I could click set at this point to add both of the objects into the application. Now we'll add our fields into the application. We're going to link in all those fields that we created earlier. But I'm going to skip over some unneeded fields such as system created by and system last modified on. Let's just stick to the fields that we created. So I'll click on company, select street address, city, state, zip code. I'll also want my attorneys and my opposing counsel. I'll click add to add in all of those items. I'm now going to repeat the process and add in all my fields that are associated with the pleading object. Once again, skipping over some unneeded system fields. So I'm going to want pleading title, data pleading, pleading type, docket number, pleading link. Along with the pleading link, I'm going to add all the pleading link types. We're also going to need attorneys and opposing counsel. I'll click add here, and then I'll click set to set all of these fields into the application. So we've added our fields necessary for our application. If we scroll down a little bit, notice that the choices section is automatically pulled in. Relativity has automatically pulled in any and all choices associated with any choice field that were selected above in the fields section. Working our way down, I'm going to link in my views. Nice easy way to do this is I'm just going to go to my contact object. Just one view there, so I'll click add, and then I'll go to my pleading object, once again adding in this view. We got both of our views, and I could click set to add those in. We also have our layouts that we customized, so let's grab those layouts. I'm going to want the contact layout and also the pleading layout. Add both of those and click set. It seems silly, but we also need to link in our tabs. We're essentially going to have to link in everything that we created. So first I'll put in my contact object, and then also my pleading. Add that, and we'll click set. We have now successfully added everything we need for our application. As you can see by looking at the buttons on the application console, we're also ready to export our application. The Show Application Breakdown link is also available now. This functionality allows you to view the application broken down into a concise visual representation displaying all the pertinent information. So I'll go ahead and click on that. I'll just have to bring my view down here, and that is going to, let me hide my taskbar here so I can see the bottom of the screen. Little Windows issue for me here. Let me see if I can get this. I'm going to refresh one time here. And once again, I'm going to click on my Show Application Breakdown. And there we go. It downloads a little HTML. And what we can see in here is all of the fields that are associated with each of the objects. What's very nice about this is we could also see the multiple objects and what they are associated with. So opposing counsel and attorneys are linked over to the contact object. So go ahead and close this, and I'm going to refresh my browser one time. Maximize. So back in Relativity, I can now push my application to the library. This will push the application to the library. Are you sure you want to proceed? I'll click OK. Now that that has been done, I'm going to click on the Relativity logo, go back to the home mode, and we'll look in the application library. And we can see that our pleading application has now been successfully pushed to the library. If I click into the application itself, we'll see some details regarding our application. The application artifacts allows us to get a granular view, once again, of our application, what fields and layouts are associated with it. It's very nice. easy way to see what is in our application here. Let's go ahead and install the application to one of our other workspaces. I'll just click on the install link and I'll choose workspaces. I'm going to put this in the pepper versus salt workspace. I'll click OK and save. We have the ability to install this to many workspaces, but I'm just going to choose one here. Right now, a Relativity application agent is grabbing onto this and installing this to the workspace. You can see that it is currently pending. We'll give this a chance to do its install work. And now it's installed. So let's take a look at our other workspace, the pepper versus salt that we pushed this into. And we can now see that we have our pleading, and we have our pleading tab with all of its information. We also have the contact tab with all of its information. Finally, you can quickly and easily uninstall your custom application from individual Relativity workspaces. For further details on uninstalling an application, see the Relativity 5 help site. I would also like to let you know that we have a lot of free training materials available to you on our website. In our training center, you can view on-demand content, which includes videos, tutorials, and recordings of our webinars, in-person trainings that are currently scheduled, and all of our upcoming webinars. Additional documentation on applications can be found on our documentation page under the Relativity 9.5 developer documentation. Let's take a look at some of that. I'm going to go back in here and take a look here at help.kcura.com. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and down here we have our developer documentation. And I'll go into 9.5. And for example, we could look up relativity objects. Relativity objects, this is a great overview of creating objects in relativity. Another good reference here is the relativity applications. Create an application relativity. This really gives an in-depth view of all different types of things that can be added to applications. Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to invite you to consider joining one of our Relativity user groups. We host meetings in areas with engaged Relativity user communities. Gatherings are designed to be educational with an emphasis on sharing experiences around a common topic. KCura representatives and local users interact casually, often with food provided. Conversations can be continued online between events via Relativity community groups. Select Community on the Relativity website to see a list of upcoming user groups and meetings to attend and to register. I also encourage you to consider joining us for Relativity Fest, our annual conference designed to educate and connect the e-discovery community. Featuring engaging panel discussions, we have hands-on labs, breakout sessions, and insights from the KCura staff, Relativity users, and industry leaders. Relativity Fest brings together legal professionals to talk, shop, and have fun doing it. You can find more information or register at relativityfest.com.